Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Parth, and today I'll be talking to you about a topic which is rather close to my heart, which is, should there be a zero ban on alcohol for drivers under the age of 25? Now, I'll be looking into some of the benefits of introducing such a legislation, along with several of the main issues that arise from it, and possible alternatives. Now, I find it rather concerning that when I'm asked to define our generation in one word, the immediate word that springs to mind is, unfortunately, inebriated. Young people, more than anyone, will appreciate that the majority of us cannot control our alcohol intake and often end up on the wrong side of the law. And it's therefore unsurprising that under 25s are more than twice as likely to fail a breathalyzer test. So it therefore initially makes sense for the government to introduce a zero ban. After all, this should lead to far fewer young drivers be driving whilst under the influence, and of course safer drivers means safer roads. Moreover, I feel that this legislation should also help to deflate the preposterous insurance premiums that young people today face. So at this point, sheer naivety might lead us to say, yes, pass this legislation. Unfortunately, it's not that easy, and like many things, there are several difficulties that we encounter when trying to enforce this stream law. Now, picture the following situation. You've consumed the occasional champagne truffle, or perhaps you've dipped into your favourite box of alcoholic chocolates. Now, it would be optimistic to assume by these means that you could be drunk or even be over the current alcohol limit. But if you were stopped and your breathalyzer reading was taken, it wouldn't be zero, and you would therefore be driving illegally. Similarly, you could be consuming over-the-counter medicines such as Pinex, which is a medicine containing alcohol. Now, if you're a young driver and you were containing Pinex or other alcohol-containing medicines, what this would mean for you is that during your medication period, you quite simply would not be allowed to drive. However, what angers me even more is the fact that this law is based on the preconception that all drivers under the age of 25 lack driving skill, which in my opinion is a preposterous statement. That range includes drivers that could be driving for a possible 7 or more years. What's more, it's brave for the government to make such a statement when there are young people in that age bracket in Afghanistan driving tanks, yet they can't be trusted with a car on the road in the UK. So at this stage, the pros and cons of this law put us in a complex situation. So what I want you to do is forget about it. Forget about this law. And let's think about some of the possible alternatives. One possible solution is reducing the current alcohol limit. It sounds obvious. But then again, what this doesn't take into account is the different effects that different amounts of alcohol has on different people, regardless of your gender or age. So instead of applying this law for all under 25s, I think it would be a lot more logical to apply it to, say, everyone who has held their licence for less than 3 years. Because imagine if you were 24, turning 25 in a month, and you had just passed your driving test. This would mean that in the near future you would be exempt from that under 25s category, and you would be allowed to consume a small amount of alcohol and drive, despite your extreme lack of experience. Possibly an intermediate licence could be issued, so once you pass you receive an intermediate licence, and after 3 years you can upgrade this to a full licence. Despite this method being relatively efficient in its practicality, I really don't think adding to the police's workload would be beneficial. In fact, a method that can be controlled without the police would be far more sustainable and, of course, would create a few more jobs. A possible method could be the black box method, which is, believe it or not, a black box which is fitted in your car and linked to a satellite up in space. Now, what this box does is it monitors your driving. It monitors several parameters such as your speed, your cornering, and what it could potentially be used to do is highlight dangerous driving. Now, I use the word potentially because, well, the technology required to actually introduce this exceeds our current knowledge. And, much like the introduction of the catalytic converter, the black box would be enormously expensive to introduce into every car in the UK, let alone the cost of running it. So now that we focus on the driving aspects, let's focus on the external effects. Let's think a little bit outside the box. Now, this zero ban, it's likely to lead to less people consuming alcohol when they go out into, say, pubs or restaurants. Well, there's already been a 45% cutback on people's expenditure when eating out. Top this off with reduced alcohol consumption really is rubbing salt into a wound. I mean, it will further reduce the profits that pubs and restaurants are generating, and it will reduce the revenues that they are generating. And at this point in time, where our economy is in bits, it seems illogical, even suicidal, to further discourage public spending. But let's say that the government do what they usually do. Let's say they pass this legislation. What it means is everyone under the age of 25 will have to rely on elder mates, possibly, for lifts home, or they will have to fork out ridiculous amounts of money for taxi fares. Likewise, they could, and indeed should, resort to public transport, which is why at the very least, public transport should be made cheaper for under 25s between certain hours, so that they have a further disincentive to use their cars illegally, regardless of whether or not they're even drinking. In conclusion, I don't think that there should be a zero limit on alcohol. Drinking a small amount of alcohol makes little difference to most people, and the current limit would not have been set if the government genuinely thought that any amount of alcohol leads to dangerous driving. However, if a zero limit is introduced, there is absolutely no clear reason why it should apply to just under 25s. By way of contrast, the elder and more experienced drivers here will have been accustomed to more lenient drink driving laws, and it's likely that, as in the past, they have exercised drink driving to what they have felt is a safe extent, they may continue to do so today. And there is therefore no clear justification why it should apply to just under 25s. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you for listening, and I wish you a good evening.